Welcome back, guys. Today we're looking at people whose last selfie with an animal cost them everything. From a YouTube creator who kept wading into a hippo's territory every time his views went up, to a filmmaker who dropped himself into restricted shark waters at night with nothing but a selfie stick and a dive light. But first, we begin at Katmai National Park in Alaska, where a travel photographer stepped off a boardwalk to get closer to a grizzly cub and put down his professional camera to take a selfie instead. It was Tuesday, September 11th, 2018, at Katmai National Park in Alaska. The air was cold and sharp, and the ground was soft from the rain that had moved through in the days before. Brooks River ran nearby, slow and steady. The park was full of raised boardwalks and marked trails that kept visitors on designated paths. And that morning, like every morning during the season, rangers were out reminding people of where they were allowed to walk and where they were not. Visitors were also reminded that stepping off the boardwalk could reduce visibility in the dense brush, making it difficult to spot bears that might already be feeding or resting only a few meters away. Casimir Nethercott was 29 years old and worked as a travel photographer. He had built a following online by putting himself closer to wildlife than most people were comfortable with. While most photographers relied on telephoto lenses from the viewing platforms, Casimir preferred getting in. He had come to Katmai during salmon season, the time of year when grizzlies flood the riverbanks to feed before winter. He brought two friends who also carried cameras, and the three of them had been out since early morning. Rangers reminded visitors that morning, as they do every day during the season, to stay on designated paths and keep a safe distance from bears, especially any bear traveling with cubs. A cub feeding alone does not mean the mother has gone far. It almost always means the opposite. Casimir noticed a cub feeding beyond the edge of the designated trail, partly hidden among thick berry bushes. He stepped off the boardwalk and into the brush to close the distance. His two friends, still back on the trail filming, called out to him. He kept moving. He was within 3 or 4 meters of the animal when he set his camera down and pulled out his phone. The shot he wanted wasn't a professional one. He wanted to be in it. I think the moment he put down his camera and picked up his phone, something shifted. It stopped being about photography and became about proving something, and I think that shift is what got him killed. The grizzly bear is one of the most powerful animals on the continent. A fully grown female can weigh anywhere between 130 and 270 kilograms. They're really fast in a way that doesn't match how large they are, and a mother traveling with a cub operates on a completely different level of alertness than a bear on its own. She does not wait to see what you are going to do next. She has already decided. The mother had been concealed in the brush just behind the berry bushes the entire time. She had not moved. She had not made a sound. She came out without warning. One moment the brush was still, and the next she was already through it and closing the gap. Casimir had no time to react. She hit him with enough force to knock him completely off his feet. Her claws raked across his shoulder and back as he went down. He landed hard on the ground and she came down with him, biting repeatedly around his head and upper neck. His friends were retreating and screaming from the trail. The attack lasted only a short time, but the injuries were severe. When the sow finally pulled back and moved toward the cub, Casimir was face down in the brush and not responding. The wounds to his head and neck were fatal. When I hear about cases like this, I don't feel anger toward the bear. She did exactly what a mother is supposed to do. What I feel is sadness because every single decision that led to that moment was made by him, not her. Rangers were contacted immediately. Rescuers could not safely reach him right away. They had to wait until the sow and cub naturally moved away from the area before anyone could approach the scene. Investigators looked carefully at everything afterward. Rangers concluded that the sow had displayed completely normal defensive behavior typical of a wild grizzly protecting her cub. There was nothing unusual about the animal. The situation had been created entirely by the distance Casimir chose to close. Rangers later referenced the incident during visitor safety briefings as a direct example of why the park's bear distance rules exist in the first place. His family asked for privacy. Online, the reaction was a mix of grief and a quiet kind of disbelief. Many of his followers saying they had always been uneasy watching him work, always waiting for something like this to happen. Personally, I think a lot of people who visit wild places like this have no real picture of how fast everything can change, and by the time that picture becomes clear, it is already too late. Casimir went into the brush to get closer than everyone else, and that decision cost him everything. But he was not the last one to make that kind of choice, and the next person who did was dealing with an animal most people never even think to approach. It was Thursday, May 13th, 2021, at the St. Lucia Estuary in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. The estuary is a wide stretch of shallow, muddy water where the river meets the coast. The banks are flat and open in some places, thick with reeds and low grass in others. The water looks calm from a distance, and on most mornings, quiet enough that you could mistake it for somewhere nothing dangerous ever lives. Local fishing guides work that stretch regularly, and knew it well. Zephyr Westover was 27 years old and ran a YouTube channel built entirely around wildlife encounters. He was not a trained guide or a wildlife expert. He was someone who figured out early on that people clicked on videos where he got close to animals, and the closer he got, the more the numbers went up. Over the past several weeks, he had been returning to the same stretch of water where a territorial bull hippo was regularly seen. Each upload had him standing a little closer than the one before. Many viewers encouraged him to get even closer, and Zephyr kept delivering. During earlier visits, guides working the area could often be heard telling tourists to give the water a wide berth whenever the bull surfaced. Zephyr had heard it more than once. Over time, those voices just became part of the background noise. When people who live in a place try to warn you, they usually know something you don't. I wish more people understood that a warning from a local is worth far more than anything you read online before the trip. He returned that Thursday morning with his cameraman. The plan was the same as always. Get in, get closer than last time, get it on camera. His cameraman raised concerns about going into the water that day. Zephyr dismissed it. He had come back enough times, he argued, that the animal had grown familiar with his presence. That idea that a wild animal becomes safe simply because you keep showing up is one of the most dangerous things a person can convince themselves of. The hippopotamus is one of the most aggressive animals on the African continent. A full-grown bull can weigh anywhere between 1,500 and 3,000 kilograms, and in shallow water, they move with a speed that catches most people completely off guard. The stretch of water a hippo claims as its own is not something it shares, and anything that enters that space is treated as a threat every single time, regardless of how many times it has seen you before. Zephyr entered the shallow edge of the estuary, while the hippo rested farther out in the deeper section. He extended his camera and began recording. His cameraman stayed on the bank. The hippo moved without any buildup. It surged forward through the shallows with a speed that left no time to react. Zephyr turned and pushed back toward the bank, but the mud along the bottom grabbed at his feet and slowed him completely. The animal reached him before he cleared the water. Its jaws locked around his torso with enough force to crush multiple ribs and cause catastrophic internal injuries. He went down into the shallows. The animal seized him a second time, shook him violently, then disappeared back toward the deeper water. Witnesses were already calling for emergency services. His cameraman could not reach him safely. And just like that, what had looked like every other filming trip turned into something nobody on that bank could stop. I keep asking myself, at what point does a pattern like this stop feeling exciting and start feeling like a warning? Responders arrived, but had to wait for the hippo to move away before they could safely approach. By the time they reached Zephyr, there was nothing left to do. Conservation officials who reviewed the case were clear. Repeated exposure to a wild animal doesn't create familiarity. It creates a false sense of security that slowly removes the caution that a person needs to stay alive. The hippo had displayed completely normal territorial behavior. Nothing about the animal was unusual. Everything unusual was on the human side. Local guides quietly incorporated the incident into their tourist safety briefings. His family did not speak publicly. The camera only ever showed what viewers wanted to see: another close encounter. It couldn't show how many small warnings had already been ignored before that final morning. Zephyr kept going back one too many times, and the estuary was the last place he ever filmed. But he wasn't the only one who let something keep pulling him closer to an animal he had no business approaching, and the next person who did was standing somewhere that should have been warning enough just by looking at it. It was Wednesday, July 17th, 2019, at Cahill's Crossing in the Northern Territory of Australia. The crossing is a low concrete causeway that spans the East Alligator River, connecting two stretches of road through a remote part of the country. The water was visible on both sides that day, moving slowly across the surface of the road. Warning signs had been posted at multiple points along the crossing, clear enough to read from a distance. The area was well known for saltwater crocodiles, and anyone who had spent time in that part of the territory knew exactly why. Peregrine Stanfield was 24 years old and worked as an apprentice mechanic. He was traveling through Australia with 4 close friends in the loose, unplanned way that a lot of people in their early 20s do. Someone in the group had seen videos of Cahill's Crossing online before the trip clips, showing crocodiles launching partly out of the water right at the edge of the causeway. That was enough to put it on the list. They spent nearly an hour at the crossing watching the crocodiles. Other visitors warned them to stay back from the edge firmly, the way people speak when they want you to take something seriously. The group had also passed the posted signs on the way in. None of it slowed them down. I think when you are in a group and everyone is feeding off each other's energy, the part of your brain that says stop gets quieter and quieter, and I think a lot of us are guilty of that. At some point, the afternoon turned into a challenge who could get the closest selfie. One by one, they edged closer to the side of the crossing. Peregrine went furthest. He sat down near the edge, dangled one foot over the side, extended his phone outward, and held the position. The saltwater crocodile is the largest living reptile on the planet. A fully grown adult can reach lengths of 5 to 6 meters and weigh over 1,000 kilograms. They are ambush hunters. They wait, holding just below the surface, almost invisible, moving only when the moment is right. Their lunge out of the water is one of the fastest movements any large animal alive can make. Most people have not even registered what is happening before it's already done. The East Alligator River at Cahill's Crossing holds a well-documented population of them, and the signs posted along that causeway are not there for decoration. Peregrine was sitting at the edge with his phone raised when the crocodile came out of the water. It did not simply surface. It launched, surging up and over the lip of the embankment in a single explosive movement that covered the distance before anyone could react. Its jaws clamped around his lower leg with full force. His 4 friends lunged toward him, reaching for his arms, but the animal was already pulling him sideways off the edge. He went into the water. The crocodile rolled, dragging him under in a violent twisting motion that caused catastrophic damage to the muscles of his upper leg and likely fractured the bone. His lower leg sustained severe crushing injuries from the initial bite. His friends were calling emergency services within seconds, but there was nothing they could do from where they stood. There was nothing those 4 people could have done once he went over that edge, and that is the part that stays with me. By the time their hands reached for him, it was already over. Rangers and emergency services responded to the scene. Recovery teams searched the water and areas downstream. Park staff confirmed that several large saltwater crocodiles were known to inhabit that section of the river, consistent with what rangers had been telling visitors for years. The search continued over the days that followed. Investigators were direct in their conclusions. Peregrine and his group had passed multiple warning signs, received face-to-face warnings from other visitors, and continued moving closer to the edge anyway. Ranger patrols at the crossing were increased afterward, and public education efforts focused specifically on the strike range of a saltwater crocodile out of water a distance most people have no accurate sense of until it is too late. Places don't become dangerous because someone dies there. They were dangerous long before that. Sometimes, a tragedy just forces everyone else to finally believe the warnings that were already there. Zephyr ignored voices. Peregrine ignored signs. But the next person in this series didn't ignore either, and the animal that came for her was one that most people standing in that room never thought to be afraid of. It was Tuesday, August 22nd, 2017, at a private wildlife park on the outskirts of Puebla, Mexico. The park operated as both a conservation space and an event venue, with enclosed areas for the animals and open-air sections where private clients could host functions. That evening, the grounds had been set up for a corporate gathering. One of the park's offerings was a supervised lion presentation for guests. Visitors remained behind designated barriers throughout the presentation, while all animal holding buildings and service corridors were secured behind locked, staff-only gates. Cosima Redmayne was 31 years old and worked as an event photographer. She had been hired to document the corporate function. She was known for finding shots that other photographers either missed or didn't bother going after. The official lion presentation had already taken place, and guests had their photographs. But Cosima wanted something different, a behind-the-scenes image that nobody else at the event would have. Staff had been clear that the animal preparation areas were off-limits. Only trained keepers were permitted inside the service corridors. An employee had already noticed Cosima moving toward the restricted section and called out to her. She kept walking. I can understand the pull of wanting that one shot nobody else gets. But there is a point where wanting something badly enough stops being ambition and starts being a risk that affects more people than just you. As the presentation ended, a keeper used a secured service gate to return the lion from the public exhibit to its indoor holding building. During those few moments, the gate remained open so the animal could complete the transfer. Cosima slipped past the employee's warning and followed through the still open gate before anyone realized she had entered the restricted area. Staff shouted for her to stop but could not physically move to intercept her without abandoning the transfer and risking the animal's position in the corridor. The African lion is one of the most capable predators alive. A fully grown adult can weigh between 170 and 230 kilograms, built for explosive short-range movement. Their reaction to an unexpected close-range intrusion is immediate and instinctive. In a confined handling corridor with nowhere to retreat, the distance between a person and a lion collapses faster than most people could ever prepare for. Cosima had lifted the camera hanging from her shoulder and was framing the shot when the lion responded instinctively. The animal crossed the corridor in under a second. It struck her with enough force to drive her into the wall before she could take a single step back. The impact from its forepaws caused blunt trauma to her upper body, and she went down onto the floor. The lion's jaws closed around the back of her neck and the base of her skull, clamping down with tremendous force and causing devastating injuries. Keepers nearby heard the commotion and responded within moments, initiating emergency procedures and working to move the animal back toward the secured section. But by the time staff could safely reach her, the injuries to her neck and head were unsurvivable. This is the part that genuinely stays with me. The keepers responded fast, the safety equipment worked exactly as designed, and it still wasn't enough. Because the one variable nobody had planned for was the person who was never supposed to be in that corridor at all. Investigators found no evidence of mechanical failure or enclosure malfunction. The conclusion left little room for interpretation. Unauthorized entry into a restricted animal handling area during an active transfer was the direct cause of what happened. The lion's behavior was consistent with normal responses to close-range intrusion in a confined space. Visitor access around animal preparation areas was further restricted, and staff procedures for private events were reviewed. The incident was incorporated into staff safety training going forward. Within the photography community, the reaction was quiet and uncomfortable. People who had worked alongside Cosima described her as someone who always pushed for the better frame, and many felt that same quality was exactly what walked her into that corridor. I keep coming back to the employee who spotted her and called out. That was probably the clearest moment where everything could have gone differently, and it passed in a few seconds. The next person in this series didn't sneak past anything, she simply wandered somewhere she had no business being, at an event that should have felt completely safe, and the animal on the other side was a tiger. It was Thursday, December 8th, 2016, at a licensed private zoo event venue in Chonburi Province, Thailand. The venue sat on several acres of landscaped grounds and hosted private functions alongside its resident animal collection. That evening, a wedding reception was underway, guests in formal wear, tables spread across the open-air sections, and staff moving through the crowd. The venue had offered a tiger photography session as part of the evening's program, a supervised experience where handlers brought guests near one of the resident tigers in a controlled setting. Once that session ended, the tiger was escorted into its indoor holding den, and the guest viewing area was closed while staff completed routine husbandry and secured the exhibit. Eulalia Fairbrother was 34 years old and worked in marketing. She was attending the wedding as a guest, not someone hired to be there, just someone who had come to celebrate. She was sociable and outgoing, the kind of person who tends to stay near whatever is happening. Alcohol had been served throughout the evening, and by the time the tiger photography session wrapped up, the reception was well into its later hours. The official photos were done, the handlers had stepped away. But the idea of getting a photo near the tiger without staff directing every angle and without a crowd waiting behind her apparently stayed with her. Rather than entering a keeper corridor, Eulalia walked around the public side of the exhibit searching for another angle. Along the perimeter, she reached a section where a maintenance gate leading to the visitor barrier had been left temporarily unsecured while staff were finishing cleanup after the photography session. The gate did not provide access to the keeper facilities, but it allowed her to step past the public safety railing and approach the mesh enclosure much more closely than visitors were ever meant to. Ignoring warning signs, she moved right up against the heavy steel fencing and leaned forward with her phone to frame the tiger inside its holding den. A wedding is supposed to be one of the most joyful nights of the year, and I think that atmosphere, the music, the drinks, the feeling that the night belongs to, you can quietly lower every instinct that would otherwise tell you to stop. The Bengal tiger is among the most powerful animals on the planet. A fully grown adult can weigh anywhere between 180 and 260 kilograms, and their bodies are built almost entirely for one purpose. Every part of a tiger, the width of its paws, the length of its claws, the strength of its jaw, exists to close distance and hold on. They do not telegraph what they are about to do, and in an enclosed space, they do not need to. A tiger inside a holding area is not relaxed company. It is a contained predator, and whatever calm it appears to show in a managed setting is not the same thing as safety. Eulalia raised her phone and positioned herself so the tiger would appear in the frame behind her. As she leaned in, part of her head and upper body came within reach of the enclosure. The tiger lunged without warning, thrusting a foreleg through the wide-gauge mesh. Its claws struck the side of her head with enough force to pull her violently against the fencing. In the struggle, her neck and face were pressed directly against the mesh, allowing the tiger to clamp its jaws onto the exposed area. Handlers who heard the screams rushed over immediately and drove the tiger back using emergency response equipment before pulling Eulalia away from the fence. Emergency services arrived within minutes, but the catastrophic injuries to her head and neck proved unsurvivable. When I picture how that moment began, someone leaning in with a phone, just trying to get one more photo at a wedding, and how fast it became something so permanent, I find it genuinely hard to process. Police who investigated were clear in their findings. Eulalia had bypassed a restricted visitor barrier and entered an area that was clearly marked as off-limits. Investigators found no evidence that the tiger had escaped or that anyone had entered the secure keeper facilities. Instead, authorities concluded that the fatal injuries occurred after she positioned herself within reach of the enclosure. The tiger had done nothing outside of what a tiger does when something enters its immediate space without warning. The venue discontinued the tiger photography program while authorities reviewed safety procedures. The incident renewed discussion about animal encounter safety at private wildlife venues across Thailand. The wedding party did not make any public statements in the days that followed. I don't think she understood in that moment what was actually on the other side of that hatch. And that gap between what people assume and what is actually waiting inside an animal enclosure is exactly what makes these stories so hard to walk away from. Eulalia leaned through a hatch at a wedding, and the next person in this series went onto restricted waters at night searching for a great white shark. It was Wednesday, February 16th, 2022, at the Neptune Islands Marine Park off the coast of South Australia. The Neptune Islands are a group of small, rocky islands surrounded by deep, open water. The area is a protected marine reserve known for great white shark activity, largely because of the seal colonies that live on the islands. Licensed operators run cage diving tours there during the day under strict permit conditions. That evening, there were no licensed boats out there, just one small inflatable sitting in the dark. Leander Baskerville was 30 years old and worked as a freelance adventure filmmaker. He had built his career around extreme outdoor content, the kind of footage that required going places most people either avoided or were not allowed to go. He had two friends who regularly filmed alongside him, and the three of them had made the trip with a clear plan. Leander would enter the water with an action camera mounted on a selfie stick while his friends recorded from the surface. The goal was underwater footage of himself with great white sharks in the background. No cage, no licensed operator, no safety team. They had deliberately launched before dawn, hoping to film in the soft morning light and leave before park staff or patrol vessels noticed them. Entering protected waters to conduct an unauthorized shark dive without permits violated marine park regulations. Leander understood the legal risk and accepted it anyway, believing a few minutes in the water would be enough to capture the footage before anyone arrived. I've filmed in places I probably shouldn't have before, nothing like this, but I understand the pull of wanting content that nobody else has. What I don't understand is looking at water known for great white sharks and deciding the shot is worth more than a cage. Commercial shark diving at the Neptune Islands works the way it does for specific reasons. Licensed operators use protective cages, trained spotters, established procedures, and boats equipped to respond if something goes wrong. Leander had none of those layers. He had a selfie stick, a dive light, and two friends on a rubber boat. The great white shark is the largest predatory fish in the ocean. A fully grown adult can reach lengths of 5 to 6 meters and weigh over 2,000 kilograms. Their primary hunting strategy is a powerful ambush strike delivered from below or from outside the target's field of view. Around the Neptune Islands, researchers have long documented great whites patrolling the seal colonies, especially during daylight hours when licensed cage diving operations are conducted. Those waters naturally attract sharks regardless of whether people are present. Leander had been in the water only a short time, with the first light of morning beginning to reach below the surface, focused on framing himself against the open water. One of his friends spotted a large shape approaching from behind moments before it happened. There was no time to shout a useful warning. The shark came from his right side and slightly below, completely outside his field of view. The strike hit him across the torso and left arm with enough force to drive him several meters sideways through the water. The shark came back almost immediately, biting into his lower torso and upper leg. The bite crushed part of his pelvis while tearing through the surrounding breathing muscles and major blood vessels. His friends moved toward him immediately, but the shark continued circling, forcing them to hesitate each time they tried to reach him. By the time they brought him to the boat, the blood loss was unsurvivable. I keep asking myself what the footage would have even shown, because in dark water with a selfie stick, you mostly see yourself. The thing that killed him came from a direction the camera was never pointed. Investigators later determined the dive had been conducted in direct violation of marine park regulations. Wildlife officials noted that every safety measure licensed shark diving operations depend on was completely absent. Officials renewed public warnings about unauthorized shark encounters in the area. His family did not make public statements. Within the adventure filmmaking community, the reaction was heavy people who had admired his work sitting alongside people who had always felt this outcome was only a matter of time. Marine safety experts later reiterated that great white sharks are highly adapted ambush predators, and removing even one layer of protection dramatically increases the risk during any close encounter. From a wedding guest chasing the perfect photo to a diver entering restricted waters, the next victim's ordinary sanctuary visit ended in the most unexpected way. It was Tuesday, November 17th, 2020, at a licensed private tiger sanctuary in Chiang Mai Province, Thailand. The sanctuary ran scheduled visitor sessions during the day where small groups could take photographs with tigers under the direct control of trained handlers. The sessions were timed, organized, and came with a clear set of rules. Every interaction followed a fixed routine developed by experienced staff, and visitors were expected to remain exactly where they were instructed throughout the session. Beyond the visitor area, service corridors connected the enclosures and were used exclusively by staff during feeding and animal transfers. Linnea Hallowell was 26 years old and worked as a graphic designer. She was traveling through Thailand with friends when she came across social media photographs of tourists sitting beside tigers, close enough to touch. Those images had been taken during properly supervised handler sessions, but nothing in the posts suggested that. What Linnea saw was a photo and an outcome, and she wanted the same outcome. She never saw the planning, the trained personnel standing nearby, or the strict limits that made those photographs possible. She arrived at the sanctuary and discovered the last scheduled session had already finished. As employees completed a controlled animal transfer, one electronically secured service gate was temporarily unlocked while a keeper pushed equipment through. Before the gate could close behind them, Linnea slipped inside unnoticed. She reached a second restricted checkpoint, but a keeper had just exited using an access card, allowing her to follow through before the self-closing door latched. Another visitor noticed and told her directly to go back. She kept walking. I understand wanting the perfect photo while traveling. What I don't understand is continuing forward after someone has already told you to stop. Linnea passed into the keeper corridor on the far side of the visitor area, holding her phone. The corridor ran alongside the enclosures from the service side, the side visitors never see and are never meant to reach. She walked until she was level with one of the tiger enclosures, then leaned in beside the fence while angling her phone for a close selfie. The Bengal tiger is one of the most powerful animals on the planet. A fully grown adult can weigh anywhere between 180 and 260 kilograms, every part of its body built to move fast, grip hard, and hold. The mesh lining a keeper corridor is designed to contain the animal, keeping most of its body well behind the barrier, while preventing direct contact under normal conditions. Close proximity can trigger the same instinctive predatory or defensive reactions seen in the wild. The tiger moved before Linnea could pull back. One forepaw shot through the mesh far enough for the claws to rake across her hand, forearm, and the side of her face, tearing through skin and tissue immediately. The impact knocked her into the corridor wall. As she instinctively turned toward the barrier, the tiger lunged again, pinning part of her upper body against the mesh. Although the enclosure prevented the animal from pushing fully through, its jaws reached an exposed section of her neck and shoulder near the fence, inflicting devastating crushing and tearing injuries before keepers successfully drove it back using emergency protocols. Emergency responders arrived quickly. Despite the rapid response, she died from massive blood loss and catastrophic trauma to her neck and shoulder. When I hear that the tiger never left its enclosure, that the barrier held, that the animal stayed on its side, I find that genuinely hard to sit with. Because it means the only thing that had to go wrong was the decision to stand beside that mesh in the first place. Investigators concluded that the enclosure itself never failed and that the incident resulted from unauthorized access into a staff-only area. Security reviews found that Linnea had bypassed multiple restricted checkpoints by closely following staff during an active transfer, rather than entering through unsecured access points. She had passed multiple restricted access signs before reaching the keeper corridor. The facility installed additional anti-tailgating controls on restricted doors, self-closing mechanisms on all service gates, added multilingual warning signs throughout the grounds, and revised staff procedures for managing animal transfers during visitor hours. Wildlife experts pointed to something broader. Influencer photographs almost never show the handlers just out of frame. The safety briefings beforehand or the controlled conditions that made those images possible, and that gap creates expectations. No licensed sanctuary can safely meet through unauthorized access. I think about how many people have seen images like the ones Linnea saw and walked away with the exact same idea. The photograph never comes with an explanation of everything that had to be in place before it was taken. Maybe that's what stays with me most about this story. The tiger behaved exactly the way a tiger is capable of behaving. The enclosure did exactly what it was designed to do. The only part of the chain that changed was a single human decision, and once that decision was made, there was almost nothing left to prevent the outcome.